Hi, everyone. My name's Allie Parkinson, and welcome to our Awaki session on informational text type. I'm here with Becky Trapnell, and we are going to dig into informational text writing today. This is the first of many sessions. One of the things you'll notice is that the format will be very similar to the narrative sessions that you were a part of. In fact, some of the information might begin to feel a little bit repetitive as we build background with Common Core and the ladder and the criteria. All of those parts might, you might notice, will follow a similar pattern, and that we hope is a good thing for you as if it starts to feel a little bit repetitive, because you'll be connecting all of those pieces as we add on to our narrative text type sessions. One of the things I want to say before I turn things over to Becky is how much I appreciate your feedback and time spent on the response questions from narrative writing. This information is very helpful for our literacy committee. It's very helpful for our instructional coaches as we continue to plan these sessions moving forward throughout the school year. Your information has been noted, and we are have a frequently asked questions link now on the Awaki portion of the Literacy Hub so that you can see your questions answered. We're making notes of the mentor texts that were used by teachers throughout narrative writing, and the list goes on and how we're trying to take your information, your responses, and work that into our work as a committee. You'll notice that we are trying to break our segments for informational writing into smaller portions. And so this first segment that we're going to proceed with is just going to be background on informational writing, big background on how it connects to Common Core. It will be about 15 minutes. And then the next session, you'll notice that it's specific criteria and grade level information on how you can apply this informational text type to your planning. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Becky, and she's going to get us started with informational text type.
And here we have one of our first graders in Grand Forks Public Schools. The great thing about informational text is that it helps kids to develop and firm up their content area understandings, and on the other hand, it helps to acknowledge their interest areas, because we know that when kids can write within their interests, that you're going to get a higher degree of engagement, and you give kids an opportunity to share what they know, to teach someone else through their writing. So this is session 6, and it is teaching Common Core writing, and the total focus is on informative or explanatory texts. And you're very familiar with the variety of formats that that kids read, that you read to kids, and that we want kids to write. The all about books, the how-to books, instructions and directions, all of them where the author tries to share information or teach about a concept. These would be reports, research reports. The South Korea would be the study of a country and the different aspects of it. Research report in science on animals. Lab reports. We haven't typically done a lot of them, but that's another area that's informative and explanatory. And additionally, informational articles. And now kids go online and have access to informational articles there, or magazines are a hard copy resource for that kind of informative text. And again, all of that is where the author is sharing information or teaching about a concept. Oral presentations, the research reports that we do now, there's a focus to take that into an oral presentation of information. The informational documentaries where kids are taking photos, doing photo documentaries, video documentaries, and again, with the intent to share information or to teach about a concept. Here's a digital resource that we haven't had traditionally, informational web pages created through PowerPoint. You know, when kids have a good background of the Common Core writing standards, this could be taught even third, fourth grade. So we're going to be seeing some things that are going to be familiar, and then some new things for you. But all of the informative explanatory texts are with that purpose to share information and to teach about a concept.
And in subsequent sessions after Christmas, you'll see some of these examples featured in a various technology examples. And so as you're looking at all of these different varieties, be thinking about how that can be applied in a with technology as well.
Excellent. Because now we know it's print and digital resources that we work with seamlessly. Another format would be, you know, the traditional newsletters from your classroom, what's happening in science and social studies, upcoming events. And again, all of that is with that intent to share information or to teach about a concept. So there is a variety, like Ellie said, of print and digital formats for informative explanatory text. So as we start this session 6, we want to kind of review some of the things you already know because they're going to apply here now with Standard 2, okay? The ladder. You already know that Standard 5, writing process, and Standard 10 are your 2 priority standards in Common Core writing. If you going on in your classroom, you're already doing standard number 5. Super. Writing routinely would be referring to how kids are writing across different discipline areas, how they're writing short pieces, long pieces. It would be volume writing, okay? The rest of the standards we know are just divided into 3 sections. What kids write, how they write, and when they're writing between pieces. And the what turns into the text types and their purposes. The how is the distribution and production, how the author writes, and then the highest level, it really is the research, and it is the highest level where they're using multiple print and digital resources to gather information and be able to explain something. So when we look at the text types, they're big. They're big. We spent 3 months on the first one, narrative. Informational and argument, they're like the 3 big blocks if we looked at our school year over 4 sections. In every text type, we're going to talk about how authors organize, the style they use, the coherence they use. We talk about writing process, the writing workshop, and the use of technology. Those 3 standards are always about how authors write. And then lastly, the research standards. So in a nutshell, I bet many of you already could reproduce this without looking, which is great. It'll help you as you plan resources and instruction for students. So looking at how we put the ladder then into a progression for the year, we see the 3 whats being central to the first 3 quarters of our year. The top of the ladder, research, is going to be focused on in May, kind of in a review sense, because we essentially started that last January. And then the how is under every text type and the top. So organization, writing workshop, and technology undergirds every text type.
One of the things to note about this progression is that this is how we've set up our learning for the year with Iwaki, starting with narrative, moving to informational. And the question has come up is, should your writing be aligned with this schedule? And the answer would be, it probably would be the most meaningful is if it somewhat coordinates with the timeline that we've created. And because of this, I know many of you have had to kind of restructure when you do narrative writing, when you do informational writing, so that it can kind of align with your learning as well. And I thank you for that. This is not to say that this will be the progression of how we set up our year moving forward once we know what our writing pilot materials are and such. this is really our plan for building capacity, building learning with the writing text types this school year. And so you see in front of you what our year rollout is. And then we'll be working in Atlas to create a more comprehensive plan of a timeline, if you will, once our writing adoption has been finalized. So I thank you for those of you that are working hard to align your writing focus with our timeline that we have set for learning.
Another thing that you know is the overlay of the reading, writing, and speaking and listening standards for ELA. We know that the central piece of all three of those areas is the children's ability to work with argument through reasoning and evidence. But in looking at informational text writing, we're seeing a unique connection between the writing standards and the speaking and listening standards. And it's in that cluster of presentation of knowledge and ideas. And so we're going to look a little deeper into that so you know exactly how that overlays. In September, we looked at the speaking and listening standards, basically broken into two groups. The comprehension and collaboration was the listening standards, of which there's only 3, and presentation of knowledge and ideas were the speaking standards, again, of which there's only 3. I'm not going to go into great depth about the listening standards, but what I want you to see is the connection between standard number 2 under listening, which talks about kids' ability to, through listening, to integrate and evaluate information presented in diverse media and formats. Visually, quantitatively, that would allude to charts and graphs, and orally. You know, we haven't always had those 3 distinctions. And so I want you to see how standard number 2, the listening standard number 2, connects with standard number 5 for speaking. Obviously, standard number 4 is your umbrella presentation standard, but number 5 connects with listening number 2. It says, in your presentation, the author makes strategic use of digital media and visual displays of data to express information and enhance understanding of presentations. So we're going to see that as time goes on. And also, this standard number 6 is huge for informational writing. It basically is talking about how speech has to adapt to the context. Some contexts are going to be more formal, where you'd use a formal register, and some are going to be more informal. Students need to be taught when you use what, and that's highly important in informational writing, especially in grades 4 and 5. You'll see this unravel. So, you know the ladder of the Common Core standards. You know its intersection of speaking and listening with writing. And lastly, we want to talk about this huge Laminex statement about how sequence really matters. That we know all learning, all understanding first starts through the ear. So when kids have that oral comprehension first, then they're able to read and comprehend that same text type, for example. But writing is the very last way that they're able now to produce that text type. So it doesn't make any difference if we're talking narrative text type or persuasive, or if we're talking informational. It starts with the speaking and listening, so that they learn the criteria through their ear, so that when they read that same text type, they're able to understand it and name and notice the criteria as they read. And lastly, to be able to write that criteria.
I think it's important that even though this year is a year of focusing on writing, that this slide comes back again and again, reminding us of our responsibility to be integrating speaking and listening and integrating reading as we are learning about writing as well. So this is an important slide that we'll again come back to throughout the school year.
So Milwaukee now takes us to informative and explanatory texts, which is standard number 2. We're going backwards in the book. The delivery of informational writing is going to be the same as narrative. We begin this session with the overview. Session 7 moves into the use of technology in informational writing. Session 8 is your planning session for experiences in your classroom for your students with informational text type, and then lastly, the sharing across the district. In this course, I just want to review our goals. The first one is just to create this year-long study of Common Core writing standards in every classroom K through 5. That's huge. The second one is for students, really, that they start experiencing the Common Core writing instruction through what you're learning. And third is more focused on the teacher again, where you have fluent use of the resources. Your hub, the elementary literacy hub, is going to be the place to go to find multiple resources that are going to help you to monitor your kids' growth, to set goals, and to basically strengthen your PLC's focus on writing instruction. So, you know, with any kind of curriculum, it always begins with kind of a focus on introducing, you know, the concepts. And then as you work with that, eventually you move into development where you're going to take your learning and, you know, start applying it. But the mastery level takes a while to get to. And in some respects, we're going to see years before our 4th and 5th grade are going to get at that mastery level. And part of it is, from a teacher standpoint, to look at the criteria of what they teach at that level is very hard. It's in many classrooms too hard because the kids haven't had the foundational work in kindergarten through 4th or through 3rd. But even for us as teachers, for us to be able to really know this stuff inside and out, it's going to take some time. Teachers will call and say, what are the district's expectations with Owaki? If I were to think, you know, looking at our learning goals about the 3 levels in learning, I would say our study, we're probably at a developing level already. Last year we had teachers that started looking at Owaki, started looking at implementation, and I would say, you know, in our younger grades, it's easier to go farther because we don't have to pull our kids so far. But man, we're past an introductory level on the study. If I look at the students and what they're experiencing, I would say across the district, it would be an introductory level. They're just starting now to get a taste of what the Common Core writing standards demands.
One of the pieces during our Google Hangout collaboration that came up in the school that I was at, we talked a little bit about the intermediate grades and how what they're producing isn't the quality of what we would want for, say, a 4th grader. And at this point, as we are continuing to learn about the Common Core standards, we just need to accept that these intermediate students might not be producing writing that is at the grade level standard expectation because we haven't built up to that, and that's okay. And so just that awareness of that you've started, that you know what is the goal, that you are having students write, those are all celebrations and things that we want teachers to feel good about.
And so we need to keep in perspective how long it's going to take to. Yeah, and then the last one, again, looking at teachers and their use of resources, like we're amazed at the mentor texts that people are using, and really how much kids are already experiencing in the classrooms. I really feel like we have stepped into Common Core writing standards. So today, we're going to be focusing on informational writing. And in our next segment, then we will begin to look at the elements of the discourse.